Ed, it's nice to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to address your audience today.
Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your taking the time, my dears. So, the question is, who are you and how did you get to where you are?
Very good. So my name is Debbie Arnold, and I've been a resident of the San Luis Obispo County for over 40 years now, married into a century-old ranching family here in the North County, and just a lot of experience that I think a lot of your listeners can relate to. Married my husband 40 years ago, and he's made a living, as did his father and his grandfather and great-grandfather before him right here. And they work very hard. We're a small family farm and ranch, as you've witnessed. We do our work ourselves. And it's been an interesting 40 years as we've watched families like ours who have made a living off of the land here become more and more regulated, and making it more difficult, as any small business, to be able to comply mostly with the paperwork that's required now. We're using the same management practices for the most part. Great stewards of the land. My children and grandchildren are here too. No one cares about this land more than we do, but there's a lot of monitoring regulation required now to be in the farming and ranching business, so a lot more time consuming. But I 3 years ago was elected to the County Board of Supervisors, so I think that's what we decided we'd talk about today, is becoming part of the government. And I've always thought that a representative government requires representation from most of the people, or there will be voices that aren't heard. And who are those voices? Usually they're the people that are so busy working they don't have time to participate. So I think today's message, if nothing else, is just to help people like myself. That's what happened to me. I was married after having children. After we were married a few years and had our small children, I realized there was something missing in our lives, and that was the preschools. My children were preschool age, and there weren't enough in this county. So I owned and operated a small preschool in Atascadero for 17 years. Small businesswoman, while my husband continued to farm and ranch. And so I've had the opportunity to work with many young families, the experience of watching different folks, cope with a lot of the governmental changes. And when our two children went off to college and we realized we couldn't operate two businesses, we consolidated back to the ranch. I had some opportunities to get more involved in our local government, and here I am today as an elected in my own right. But it became very apparent to me that people like myself, I was a mother, small business owner. My husband, we were in business for ourselves. We both worked really long hours, really hard. Two children in college, and just realizing, you know what? It's people like us that need to have our voices at least considered in our own county and local government. So,
well, Debbie, was there a turning point? Was there some issue, something that made you decide to become unusual? Not that, sometimes people say, well, what can an average person do? And my response is, well, stop being average, and that's the first step.
Right.
At what point did you stop being average?
Well, I think that after 17 years, I sold my property, my little preschool business in town, came home to help more with the ranch work, and I had the opportunity at that point to go to work for other elected officials. And it was really then that it dawned on me, and I hope I can share that message with your audience, that it is a representative government, and who should be represented? The working class. And I was that, right? So I had at that point children that were at college, it's just locally here at Cal Poly, and then later, they married and grandchildren, and we so many generations of our family have been here, making a living here, been part of the community. My husband served on the local school board for 12 years. I mean, we've been part of our community for such a long time. And it became apparent that really the cost of regulation was becoming more difficult for all small businesses, not just agricultural businesses. And there was no shortage of comments, that, boy, this is hard, or that's hard, or I wish, my points would have been considered when these regulations were passed. And that's when I realized, I've had some experience now in local government, and maybe I am a person that can speak for many, and that was really the motivation that.
Well, what would you say to a person who is considering doing what you did? You must prepare them for something, give them some advice, things to look out for, things to do, things not to do. Based on your experience, what kind of advice would that be?
My advice would be, if you're passionate about your home, and I think so many of us are, and I believe that, most everyone that I've run across loves their county and loves this place, and sometimes we just have different ideas about how we want it managed or different visions. But again, a representative government needs to represent everyone, and especially the working people, the small businesses, the economic engine of the county needs to be represented. And it's time consuming, sure, fascinating. It's really an honor to be able to serve or be elected to serve the citizens of the county. And but I think that people just need to consider. You hear a lot, I can't do it, or I'm really busy. I think that just about all of us, have those same kind of constraints. But it is a very worthwhile endeavor. And I think people just need to stop. Are you passionate about your home? Do you have something you wish that, you want to say that you really wanted to be heard? And are you a person that would be a good representative of others?
Well, let's deal with that. What does it take to be a person who would be a good representative in government?
Well, I think that it just takes. I think it just takes the compassion and the kind of the fire in your belly, I guess, to get through it. I mean, campaigning is time-consuming. It's work, and that you really need to get out, take your message, take your message to the people, and that takes a little doing and a little bit of time, because you have to reach out to a lot of people and you have to go to where they are. But if your message resonates with other folks, in other words, again, I'll go back to the small business aspect and the cost of regulation and how it's affecting small businesses, in some cases putting them out of business. And it isn't always just the money, but it's the time that it takes to comply and lots of paperwork and that kind of thing. I'm finding that really resonates with a lot of people. And even if you aren't a small business owner and you're a consumer, the cost of these increasing regulation affects the cost of the goods and services that you utilize as well. So when I hear lots of people talk about that, I wish something could be done about that. Those kinds of messages, if it's a common enough theme, and if enough people agree with you, then absolutely they want someone in the chair, on the dais, bringing those.
Well, that's an interesting point. Now, if people agree with you, if they are already strong in a position, obviously it's a good idea to advocate that. But what if what if issues are out there, big issues, that the average person is not really tuned in? They know that things are not right, things are time-consuming, that costs are going up, and that government is growing, but they don't understand some of the bigger issues. Is it wise or unwise for a candidate to become a teacher and take on some hard issues that are not already in the frontal lobes of the voters?
Very often, when important issues come up, you have support and opposition, especially if this is leading towards new regulation. And oftentimes you have a small percentage of the population on either side, and then you have the vast majority of the population unaware that this is even being discussed, that it has the potential for changing their lives in some way with new laws or new taxes or new regulation being the result of the discussion. So yes, I spend a lot of time going to meet with groups, and some of them are advisory groups, neighborhood advisory groups, and some of them are industry organizations. But I do like to bring up what's coming down the pike, what we're about to discuss, what we're about to make decisions on. It could be one singular project, should that store go in that location, or it could be as broad as a land use regulation that will affect every property owner in the county. But I certainly was there too most of my life when I was raising children, running a business, staying active with my children's activities. I didn't have time to keep up on all the issues. I think that when you're in the agricultural business, you tend to stay up on the land use issues maybe more than most, only because it affects your business and what you're doing. But I'll admit that if 30 years ago you'd have asked me, I would have been that majority in the middle that really didn't know. And I always appreciated the opportunities to be just caught up by a summary of the issue, not reading the 1,000 pages that it takes to really focus in on it.
What's the most important thing, if you could narrow it to say one or two things, to be successful in getting into City Hall, so to speak?
Right. For folks that are interested in running for elected office, I think that you start by creating or forming a base, what we call a base of people that are supportive of you, that agree with you, that are willing to, kind of help you kind of get those tentacles out there and start reaching others. We all have those groups that you could consider your base. They're your friends, they're your family, they're the people that you socialize with at your church, or maybe you belong to particular groups or industry groups, and the chambers and the farm bureaus and those kinds of organizations. Many people belong to service organizations and work with other people. So that's kind of the beginning. Discussing, identifying issues that are important, that are important to your town, your county, your area, and discussing it with others. And when you find, people are feel like their voice isn't being heard, is it a big group of people or a small group? Because if it's a big group, then clearly that voice does need to be heard, and someone needs to carry a message into City Hall, so to speak, and make sure that those folks are represented. And when you do identify that group of people or that message that you want to carry, then the work has just begun, because you have to define the message, and people need to know why they need you in there representing them. What is that message? And if it's important to the majority of the people, they'll be interested in you carrying the message for them, and hopefully interested enough to get involved in your campaign. But you have to reach out to them, and there are a lot of folks out there then that you need to communicate with.
I have a chicken and egg question for you.
Sure.
Which is the proper or the most effective way to get this started? For a candidate to declare and then go seek organizational support, or for organizations to decide they need a candidate to represent their point of view and they seek a candidate?
I think it's the candidate identifying the need. Someone needs to be elected that brings this message to the table. That is, and I have the time or the energy that it takes to do that. And then reaching out to the organizations and the folks that and say, I've been thinking. We know, and I hear a lot of you, worried about the direction that local government's going. I have the time and energy right now, and I believe that I would, be able to be a good representative for us all. Are you with me? And you start that way, and you identify people that are willing to endorse you. It's really important too, because no matter how hard you work, you're not going to reach out to everyone or it's difficult in person. And a lot of people, they're working, they're busy. They might just look to their neighbor, that's someone else, someone they respect, and say, hey, have you been keeping up on these different candidate choices that we have? And so word of mouth by other people that have been active in the community, that's important. Those endorsements go a long way because they tell others what you're all about, and kind of goes from there.
How did you do that?
When I first decided to run, I was actually working for another elected, so I was a field representative for, at the time, Assemblyman Sam Blakesley. And the land use regulations that were coming down the pike that were going to affect agricultural properties were starting to come in waves. And I thought, hey, we need someone in production agriculture needs to be more active, where we really do have a voice and a lot of input when these things are being decided. So I started by the process I described, getting endorsements, going to people that I knew were active in various organizations in the community, saying, for these reasons, I feel like I need to step up and run for office, and would you be willing to support me? That's how it started.
Would you care to identify which organizations you approached?
Oh, you just start approaching everyone. So think of an organization, and that some organizations are not politically active, nor do they want to be. They just don't get involved. But many are, and industry organizations, people that most businesses have an opportunity to join an organization. If you're you have a shoe store, there's most likely a organization of other shoe store owners. But when issues become so pervasive that many businesses are affected, they're listening usually. And if you are your message, or you're a representative that is trying to carry a message that they want carried, they usually will come to the table. It's really interesting. You have all different levels of support. So, of course, political organizations, the County Republican Party, for example, is very pro small business. And they are in the business of identifying and supporting candidates. So that is a no-brainer. You go to them and ask if they're willing to endorse you or support you.
What are some of the things that you would advise candidates to do or not to do in particular to cut through a lot of time that they would otherwise need to learn by hard experience?
Mm-hmm. I think that most of the people that are interested in running for office, usually they've been involved in some way, so they have a little idea. I mean, you would have to, or what would your message be, And so becoming familiar with the process is so important. And I think for me, I understand that, oftentimes we think our message is important, but we might be in such a small minority. And but again, a representative government does best when as much information is laid out on the table as possible before your decision makers make the decision that affects everyone. But I think to answer your question, a little bit of experience with the process is good. So just following the process, or maybe a potential candidate's been involved with one important issue that really kind of rose to the attention of the front page, that kind of thing. And from there, you kind of get an idea of how the game is played and how the process works. And then from there, you kind of develop a knowledge of who the other key community leaders are, and what kind of messages they're advocating for, and that kind of thing. And you can get a good lay of the land, and assess it yourself. Is my message will it resonate with the most of the people or a lot of the people, or is it important to everybody? Again, I'll go back to the example. Maybe you're not a small business owner, but it might be interesting to you to know that if a particular regulation is passed, or that may affect the cost of the goods that you buy every day, that kind of thing. And so if whether it's reform or you're a candidate that's just trying to make a change with a new issue, bring up something new, then you kind of just test the land and see how many other people are interested in the message that you're trying to carry to City Hall.
Interesting point you made about having some experience in the process so that you know what you're doing and not wasting a lot of time. You made a comment to me the other day about the importance of losing. I presume those two topics are tied together. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, I will. The first time I ran for office, I really had the same message. It was really none of my motivation changed. In other words, I was carrying the same message, but I wasn't experienced in how I was expressing myself. So sometimes that takes a little practice too. But the very first key ingredient, I think, is the passion. The passion that what you have to say is important, and will everyone please listen, because I have something really important to say, and I want you all to know about this when you talk about being a teacher. So with that passion, I went out and ran the first time, and really worked hard trying to reach out and explain to people, that our county has passed thousands of pages of regulation in the last few years, and I don't think this is the answer, or it's improving our lives. In fact, I think that it's creating all these difficulties. So working hard to get that message, to talk to people, to let them know why I thought that we needed to change all those things, and I did not prevail. So I think what I was talking to you about was it didn't diminish my passion. I wasn't sure I'd ever have an opportunity to run again or have that, same campaign experience, but I did, and the second time I was successful. So here I am as a county supervisor now, but the value of the experience of running, I was never sorry, after it was over, that I had stepped out and done that. It was a fabulous experience, and it's very thought-provoking experience when you run for office, because you realize, of course, we have a lot of diversity in this county, as we should, and so considering other people's opinions and trying to fold it in and come up with the best solutions for the most of the people. I always say people form their opinions from their life's experience. I would be the first to admit I haven't had, the same life experience that others have. So the lesson, or my experience, taught me that when you're campaigning, when you have the passion and you think your message is important, it just carries you. Win or lose, it's still a fabulous experience, and you engage in conversations on issues with people, all kinds of people that agree with you and people that don't. But the important thing is you learn about other people's views, and you start to take all that into consideration, and you realize that people come to their conclusions and opinions from their own life's experience, and that it's very different, and often very different from yours. But again, our electeds, when faced with important decisions, they just have to know that they're trying to make the decision that's the best for the most of the people, and to move us forward in a good way.
Hopefully we have a lot of people watching this video who are thinking to themselves, I wonder if I should take on this task. What's your advice to them?
My advice is, again, when we think back to the history of our country and the fabulous governmental experiment that this has been, the United States of America, and we know, a lot of us have read about the background of the founding fathers, and again, they were just people, and they thought, you know what, this is an opportunity, and I have something to share that I think will make it better, or at least keep it going down the right track. And you know, in the history of our country, we know that some people gave their lives, or certainly did risk their lives. For us, we don't have to risk our lives, and we don't have to leave our families for a year at a time. It is a very honorable, fulfilling thing to do, to be able to represent your peers in local government. And in today's world, the sacrifice is minimal compared to what others have given. So I think that people that are interested absolutely should pursue it. It's a fabulous experience, and I almost feel like, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Campaigning is hard work, and these are important decisions. So they weigh heavy when you're trying to be sure you're making the right decision. But all of that considered, it's still an amazing experience, and you know, you become part of the history of your community, and it's really a fabulous thing to do. I would encourage anybody that thinks they have the time and the energy and are passionate about, you know, the way the community moves forward, to give it a try.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate that. I would think the theme of your presentation is fire in the belly.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it, and you certainly are a great role model.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, I'm nothing more than what so many other people. My experience that I bring to the table is just being passionate about my community. But you know, again, my family works hard. All of us do. I'm a mom. I know what it's like to run a house and run a small business, and I just think that those are the kinds of things that need to be considered when decisions are made.
Well,
So
I'm glad you're there. Thank you.
Okay.